That's it. All right, so we are the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment, and I want to welcome everybody to our meeting this evening. And as always, it's a great pleasure for our committee to get outside of Yellowknife and travel into the communities. And this evening, it's our honor and privilege to be here on the traditional territories of the Inuvik and Neguichin people. And it's also a very special opportunity for us to hear from you about the important bills that we have before us. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce committee. On my right is Danny McDeely, MLA for Sawtoo and Deputy Chair of this committee. Myself, Corey Vanthine, I'm the MLA for Yellowknife North and the Chair of the Standing Committee. Kieran Testart is the MLA for Cam Lake in Yellowknife. Kevin O'Reilly is the MLA for Frame Lake in Yellowknife. R.J. Simpson is the MLA for Hay River North, and Herb Nakamayak is the MLA for Nunakput. We also have with us from our research department, Mr. Steve Dunbar, and we also have with us from Public Affairs and Communications, Chris Cartwright, and our committee clerk, Mr. Michael Ball. So to get things started, I would like to start with some opening comments. Today, the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment is holding a public hearing on Bill 38, the Protected Areas Act, Bill 39, Environmental Rights Act, and Bill 44, the Forest Act. The Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment is a committee of regular members of the Legislative Assembly. The bills we are reviewing today were introduced by the government. They were given first and second reading in the Legislative Assembly and then referred to this committee for review. It's at this point where I like to interject and kind of let folks know that the Standing Committee really is not even an arm of government. We are a standing committee where our objective is really to basically provide some degree of review and critique on those bills that are being presented by Cabinet, and in fact, in this case, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources. The Standing Committee is holding public hearings on these bills in the communities of Fort Smith, Katloditchi First Nation, Hay River, Fort Providence, Betchico, this evening here in Inuvik. Tomorrow we'll be in Norman Wells before holding the final meeting in Yellowknife. And then we report back to the Legislative Assembly on the proposed legislation during the upcoming August sitting of the Legislative Assembly. It is our responsibility as a standing committee to consult with residents of the NWT on what they like or don't like about these bills. We would like to hear your views and comments, which will be used by the committee to identify any changes we would like to see made to the draft legislation, and which we will then report back to our colleagues in the Assembly. I wish to briefly describe the intent of these bills. Bill 38, Protected Areas Act, proposes to establish new legislation that will allow the GNWT to create permanent protected areas in the NWT where there are important plants, animals, land, cultural, or historical sites. It also allows for co-management of a protected area with an Indigenous government or organization. This bill says what is allowed to happen in protected areas and what is not allowed. Mining exploration, oil and gas development and exploration, and energy developments are prohibited. Small-scale renewable energy projects may be developed within a protected area or by an adjacent community. Roads or power lines may be permitted with consultation of the Protected Areas Management Board. Bill 39, Environmental Rights Act, proposes to change the existing legislation by protecting people's rights to a healthy environment, help ensure the GNWT always considers how the environment could be affected, and investigate when a person reports to the minister that someone has harmed or could harm the environment. Gives residents of the NWT tools to help the GNWT protect the environment. And the GNWT must write a report every 4 years on the state of the NWT's environment, which will be reviewed by the Legislative Assembly and allow time for public comment. Bill 44 proposes to establish new legislation that will provide tools for managing forests and the use of forests in the NWT to keep them healthy, provide tools to prevent and respond to wildfires, create forest harvesting agreements, permits, and licenses, allows the GNWT to create rules around harvesting timber and create rules on burning outside communities, allows the GNWT to create rules for harvesting of other forest resources such as berries, mushrooms, and other plants, respond to insects, invasive plants, and forest diseases. For those who haven't already done so, we do have copies of the bills and plain language materials on the table, sort of off to the side at the rear or to my right. So please, we encourage you to help yourself. If you haven't already contacted our committee clerk, Michael Ball, on my far right, if you care to speak this evening, you can reach out to him and he'll make sure that he adds you to my list. So far this evening, I have the Manny Kudluk, representing Inuvik Game Council, will be speaking at the appropriate time. And then I would also like to let people know that we also accept written submissions, and so if you care to do so, we will be accepting those either by postal mail or by email until May 3rd, 5 o'clock. One piece of final housekeeping, please remember that all submissions will be part of official committee records, and may be reflected in our final report. Any submissions made during this meeting may also be televised or broadcast, like this evening, via social media. So thank you everyone for your patience in allowing this introduction, and with members' agreement, we can now open the floor to comments from the public. Do members agree? Agreed. Thank you, members. So without further ado, I will ask if we can, is that mic working okay? Ask you to give that microphone to Mr. Kudluk. Mr. Kudluk, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman and members of the Standing Committee, my name is Manny Kudluk. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Inuvik Game Council. I would like to thank you all for coming to Inuvik to hear from Inuvik about these new bills which have been introduced to the legislature on behalf of the GNWT Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Inuvik, including Inuvik Regional Corporation, Joint Secretariat Councils, and the IGC have worked together to review and respond to these bills. A lot of new legislation has come at us quickly, and our resources are very limited. Despite this, the Game Council has some comments about the bills to share with your committee tonight. The Inuvik Game Council is established by subsection 1473 of the Inuvik Final Agreement, or IFA, to represent the collective Inuvik interest in wildlife, which includes habitat, harvesting, and this means Inuvik Game Council has the interest in the environment for the Western Arctic region. The Inuvik Game Council is made up of representatives from the Hunters and Trappers Committee and all Inuvik communities. Game Council represents a view from the land on behalf of Inuvik harvesters in our presentation to your committee tonight. I am not a lawyer, and dealing with legislation is complicated, and the Inuvik Game Council has already forwarded written comments to the committee, and I'm only going to be speaking to high-level details tonight. If the committee has any legal questions arising from our written submission, I will take them under advisement and will respond to them in writing later. We were not able to have our legal counsel here for this meeting. We have reviewed Bill 38, the Protected Areas Act, Bill 39, the Environmental Rights Act, and Bill 44, the Forest Act. I'll make comments of them in the order. Bill 38, the Protected Areas Act, the IFA, Inuvik Final Agreement, sets up a co-management framework for renewable resource management in the Inuvik settlement region, and we have over 35 years of experience with the system. It is very important to the Inuvik and our communities. Bill 38 sets out a process for the creation of new territorial protected areas. Inuvialuit have large areas of private land, and as a result of settling the final agreement, and it is essential that any new proposals for protected area be supported by Inuvialuit before any action is taken on by GNWT ENR. If a new protected area is to be set up in the Inuvialuit settlement region, the Game Council recommends that the area be co-managed and that one of the existing councils, we suggest the Wildlife Management Advisory Council, NWT, be given the responsibility and the resources necessary to do that. The Game Council does not want to see new land or environmental management boards which are outside of the IFA set up for these protected areas. Bill 39, the Environmental Rights Act. Bill 39 includes provisions which allow investigations and make provisions for lawsuits to protect the environment. These are complex matters, but we understand that the thresholds for these activities are low, and the scope for these investigations and/or lawsuits is quite broad. The Game Council is concerned that these provisions might be used to challenge the legitimate decision-making of land claims organizations such as the HTCs or even the Game Council or the Inuvialuit Land Administration. We don't think that GNWT has any role in this kind of review or challenge to the actions of the final agreement-based institutions, and this includes the decision-making of final agreement co-managers. We recommend that the committee review the bill to ensure that this kind of interference with Inuvialuit decision-making cannot happen. Bill 44, the Forest Act. Forestry is not an issue in the ISR, but the bill includes plants in its definition of forest resources. The development of this bill resulted in concerns among Inuvialuit and other Indigenous governments about the reflection of co-management in the text of the Act. The Game Council wants to emphasize the importance of co-management generally to the way that renewable resource management takes place in the ISR. This bill should reflect the central role in the importance of co-management to forestry. In conclusion, I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to make this presentation, and good luck with your work and on the review of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kudluck, and thank you for sharing your comments and concerns on behalf of the Inuvialuit Game Council. At this point in time, we also respect and appreciate that you have given us a more detailed submission previous to this evening, so thank you for that. At this time, while you've given us a heads up that you certainly might not be able to answer any questions with regard to legalities, often we'd like to open the floor to committee, and if they have just some need for clarification or a few minor questions, we'd like to let them ask. So with that, I would like to ask committee if they have any questions for the presenter. Any questions or points of clarification required from the committee from this presenter? I have Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks very much, Mr. Kudluck, for coming here this evening. And I've had a chance to look at the written submission as well, and I think there's some helpful suggestions in here about improvements we can make on the bill. I'll just go to, say, the Protected Areas Act, and I think it's reflected in your submission as well that you recommend that co-management be incorporated better into the bill itself. And I'm not going to put you on the spot right now, but I'm wondering, we've had, last night we were in Betchico and we met with the Tlicho government. One of their suggestions was that in the Wildlife Act, there are provisions where co-management bodies and Indigenous governments are written right into the bill at certain points in the Wildlife Act, and they suggested that that be used maybe as a model to look at how to do it in this bill, in the Protected Areas Act. And I see in your submission that you want to do this as well. So if you have any specific suggestions, and I'm not asking you right now, but where in the bill you'd like to make sure that, say, the Game Council or IRC or somebody's, there might be mandatory notice or a requirement for the minister to consult with Indigenous governments before he or she might make a decision. If you can help us with the specific places in the bill where you'd like to see that kind of stuff put in, that'd be really helpful for us. So I'll just leave it at that for now, Mr. Chair, but I think you've given us some helpful ideas, and maybe just a little bit more detail from you folks on where you want to be incorporated into the bill would be really helpful for us. But thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That doesn't necessarily require a reply, but if there's at a point in time when if you guys care to add more to your previous submission along those lines, it would be very well appreciated. Any further comments, questions, points of clarification? Oh, sorry, Mr. Kudlick. In response, thank you.
Definitely, if we could get that in writing, of course, we'll respond fairly quickly. I'm just sorry John, our lawyer, wasn't available to come with me today. He could have answered us very quickly.
All right. Thank you. Much appreciated. Is there any other member of the public here this evening that would like to speak to Bill 38, the Protected Areas Act, Bill 39, the Environmental Rights Act, or Bill 44, the Forest Act? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Thank you, committee members. Wow. You know, I just wanted to say that I'm actually not a Northwest Territories resident, but my people do have, we're negotiating transboundary claims in NWT right now with the Gwich'in and the Sawtoo up on the headwaters of the Arctic Red River. We've talked about this the protected area strategy, Bill 38, with our NWT counterparts, negotiators. But one of the things that, you know, as we're negotiating, we didn't think this was going to happen that quick, or we should have seen some letters. I don't know if my chief and counsel actually seen any of that. Just to back up, just to let you guys know, we live across the borders over in Mayo, Yukon. Our traditional territory comes up into the headwaters of the Arctic Red River. And so I actually just ran into Danny today, and I just kind of found out about this meeting, and I thought I'd come and listen to hear what you guys are talking about. I wish my First Nation was a little more involved with this. So I think for now I'm just gonna leave it, and just to hear when you guys go through some of these acts, I'd just like to find out a little more information. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Say your name for the record. Pardon me? Put your name on the record.
For the record, I'm Steve Byck, B-U-Y-C-K, with the First Nation of Nacho Nayuk Dun. That's up in Mayo, Yukon. And I'm one of the negotiators for NND on transboundary claims in NWT. So all of these acts will have an effect on us. I just want you guys to be clear of that. So just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Byke. We really appreciate you coming in and sharing a few words. And if you'd like to, the easiest way in which to follow this moving forward is to go to the NWT Legislative Assembly's website and to our standing committee's link on there. And all of these bills and the state of where they're at and what have you can be easily followed through that website. And we keep everything updated as best we can and as in timely a fashion as we can as we move along through the steps and through the progress of these bills. And those are certainly links there on that on our committee website that you can share with your First Nation as well. That would give you all of the what we heard reports, the plain language reports, the actual bills themselves, the new drafts of the bills, etc. All right. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak this evening on any of the bills before us? No pressure, right? Please, Michael will bring a mic over to you, and if you can please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Katarina Owen. And I apologize, I'm also not a lawyer and not very familiar with the whole process. Do you guys also get the letters that were submitted prior to your committee was established? I don't know the right terms, but do you get the letters specifically that the Renewable Resource Council board submitted to the our minister? Do you guys have access to those letters? No.
No, that's the short answer is no, we have not. There's a number of bits of information that we have asked for that are still kind of, not all of it has come our way exactly, so, but those specifically we have not. I'll just let maybe other members make comments. Thank you.
This is going to be a cue forming. Hi, I'm Kieran Testart, member of the committee. So our committee is a permanent committee of the Legislative Assembly, but we don't work on issues like this until the bills make their way through the House, and then they come to what's called the committee stage, and that's where we start our work. Earlier, our chair spoke of the difference between this committee and the government as a whole, and we are separate, completely separate from government as the legislative branch, so we don't have access to the engagement that the government has done with the Intergovernmental Council, consultations with resource boards, with other stakeholders. However, as a committee, we can request that information, and we do have certain powers as a committee to obtain that information. And it's becoming more apparent, at least for me, as we've done the last week of consultations in Fort Smith, Hay River, Katladici, Betchiko, and now Inuvik, that there's a lot we need a better understanding of what happened before the bill reached us, and I think we'll get a better understanding of the co-drafting mechanisms that put this bill, the bills to us, and certainly where those processes were successful, and we have bills that satisfy all parties, and one bill in particular that doesn't seem to have had the same result. So we need to kind of do our homework, and that's going to take some digging with those kind of correspondence and a few other pieces that we're not privy to at this point. But I think before we wrap up and report back on the bills in August, we'll have the opportunity to at least try to get that information and do what we can to get that information, to get the full picture of how these bills were developed. So, very good point. I wish we had more I wish we could say we had them at this point.
Thanks. Thanks very much for the question. Just want to be really clear. We are regular MLAs. We're not in cabinet. We're not the people that drafted these bills. The first time we saw these bills was usually the day before, at first reading in the House, and then second reading usually happened the very next day, and then they get referred to committee. So the first time we saw them was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, because all of these bills were introduced in our probably in February, March of this year. And so our job is to take these bills out and get public comment on them. But I can tell you that the committee has written to the minister asking for the correspondence with the Indigenous governments before we saw the bills. We haven't got it. We've asked for it. I think it's important for us to get that kind of information so we can understand how these bills were developed and whether they indeed incorporate all of the comments, concerns, issues that Indigenous governments and the co-management bodies raised. So there's a lot more work to be done. Yeah, thanks.
No, yeah.
You struck it there.
But I do want to be clear. There's been a, like in the instance of it last evening when we were in Betchiko, the Wakizi Renewable Resources Board was a presenter and did come and present and had supplied us previous submission as well, similar to the Inuvik Game Council. Is there a second question?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Reilly?
Thanks. I guess I just wanted to say one other thing, that if Indigenous governments wish to share any of that with the committee, I don't know what sort of confidentiality was involved in the co-drafting process to develop these bills, but if Indigenous governments or the co-management bodies wish to share information with the committee, we're more than happy to get it. And our job is to try to work and improve these bills, so thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other presenters from the public with regard to the bills before us this evening, I just want to say once again on behalf of the committee that it is our honor and privilege to be here on the traditional territory of the Inuvik and Gwich'in, and we really appreciate hearing from you today. And without further ado, our meeting can be adjourned. Thank you very much.